everybody. I'm back in here to talk TI-99 tech once again, with the topic this time being just a bit self-indulgent because what I want to talk about today is my favorite TI collection items, and what makes them my top TI treasures over and above all the rest. Not necessarily because they're the rarest or the most valuable things I've got taking up space around here, mainly just because, for me, they're the best examples of what makes TI-99 computing interesting, in the 1980s or in the 2020s, as the case may be. So that includes tech like TI's first-party expansion hardware, which adds everything you need to make the TI-99 a proper development machine. Then also in there are the third-party peripherals that give the TI-99 a whole new set of capabilities. And likewise making an appearance is the software that shows off the mind-blowing things that the standout developers for this computer have done on the machine from 1979 to now. But first and foremost in my rundown, there's no leaving out the launch year TI-99 tech that can take us back to where the story of the TI home computer began. The TI-99-4 debuted in 1979 and gave the world a first look at TI computing. And as glad as I am to have a fully working and 100% original TI-99-4, which is still doing its thing at the ripe old age of 45, I'm also really glad to have all the original promo materials from the 99-4 launch year that laid out TI's vision for the machine. I've scanned all those and put them up on my TI materials library at pixelpedant.com incidentally, so feel free to grab a copy there if you'd like. Back to the machine though. Well, I'll admit the 99-4 is not the easiest machine to actually use, because where the 4A later on gave us a durable, full-travel, full-size keyboard, the original 99-4 built itself around a weird little chiclet keyboard with a whole pile of issues. Not enough keys for starters, and no repeat delay, so repeated keystrokes are a big issue. Plus, no click at the contact point, so missed keystrokes are also a big issue. Though, having said all that, 45 years on, sometimes it's just fun to use weird old hardware on its own terms. So when I do pull out my 99-4, I'm in for the full 99-4 hardware experience. Speaking of which, no TI-99 hardware experience could be complete without my next must-have collection item, the 99-4 Peripheral Expansion System, or the P-Box, PEB, or PEB for short. I like to keep one of my PEBs in classic condition with just the 5 cards that TI made in the lifetime of the TI-99, those being the flex cable card connecting to your TI-99, the single density disk controller, which will give you up to 3 floppy drives, the RS-232 card, which will give you the connections for your modem and printer, the 32K memory expansion, which will give you the RAM you need to develop programs in assembly, Logo, and Pascal, and finally, the UCSD P-System card, which will give you a whole new operating system where that Pascal development can happen. I'm particularly happy to have that last one, the P-Code card, since while they sold well enough for anyone who wanted one to get one at the time, most have an electrical issue that eventually kills the card. So having a P-Code card and having a working P-Code card are unfortunately quite different things. But happily, I've got the latter, so Pascal development is on the menu. And my PEB full of TI's first-party cards is complete. Which isn't to downplay third-party peripherals because, well, one of my favorite TI-99 add-ons is one of those. The Milton Bradley MBX, which I'm really delighted to have complete and functioning, because nothing shows off the oddball capabilities of a fully accessorized TI-99 like the MBX. With voice recognition so you can tell the software what to do, with voice synthesis so it can speak for itself, and with input using a 4-button analog joystick and a keypad with game-specific overlays. So, needless to say, control possibilities here go a long way beyond what you could do with the typical TI hand controller. And along with the unit comes a native game library, with the stars of the show there being Championship Baseball as the top sports game for the TI-99, and I'm Hiding as its best education game in my opinion. Then Bigfoot as a multi-screen platformer unique to the TI-99, which, even on a system with a great version of Donkey Kong, still might be my favorite original era TI-99 platformer. So the MBX is one of my favorite bits of TI-99 tech I own. For being such a weird little gizmo with such one-of-a-kind features.
Oh no! Oh yes!
And because with no emulator implementing the MBX, the real thing is the only way to experience it. Though even if someone did emulate the MBX, you can't emulate the feel of a custom controller or a custom keypad. So for me, an input device like this is where I most want to have the real thing in my collection. Which brings me to my next input device collection highlight, the TI-WiFi Trackball. Now, Wiko made controllers for lots of systems, but they did TI gamers a particularly big favor, selling an adapter for Atari joysticks so you didn't have to use TI's own clunky controllers anymore. Then, more importantly to me, making the WiFi Trackball. So, in any arcade game that calls for a trackball, you can use one right on your TI-99. Looking at TI's classic game library, though, you might be inclined to say, well, that's great and all, but none of these games support trackball input. None of them even know what a trackball is. So you might expect a device like this to end up in the same situation as the MBX, where it has a few cool native titles, but zero support everywhere else. Well, the good news is the WiFi Trackball connects to your joystick port and just translates trackball motion to joystick input, so it works with any software a joystick works with. Which isn't to say it's the perfect solution for every game. If you're playing a game that wants accurate split-second movement in the cardinal directions, no, a trackball is not your solution. And honestly, a joystick probably isn't either. Keyboard input does have a lot of upside when you just need to hit up, down, left, right, and nothing else. But on the other hand, in a game where motion is more fluid, a trackball can be perfect. So in my opinion, Barrage is the top game for the TI-99 when it comes to trackball control. And after all, Arcade Missile Command itself is a trackball game, so this doesn't just work really well as a solution for Barrage, it's also the authentic control experience for this kind of game. But anyway, I started this rundown with my favorite piece of hardware representing where the TI-99 and its tech began, so I figure now it's time to look at where all that tech ended up as the TI-99 itself left the market. And outside of unreleased prototypes, the TI CC40 is the best illustration of that. The CC40 is a portable TI BASIC computer, whose version of BASIC is mostly compatible with the TI BASIC and TI Extended BASIC iterations, but adds some all-new features and speeds things up a lot. Naturally, with a one-line screen, there's only so much you can do with this machine graphically, but it does give you character patterns your program can redefine, so CallCare can give you custom graphics and animations, just like you're used to on the TI-99. And while the keyboard here is kind of mushy and a bit oddly laid out, it's at least a tactile experience that might give you some TI-99 4 nostalgia for better or worse. Especially because, like the 99.4, the CC40 uses keyboard overlays to display special commands. Not a lot of CC40s were made, but it did make it out onto the consumer market, so there are enough out there that most who want one have one. The main struggle is just that 40 years on, LCDs on these machines usually aren't doing too well at this point. Missing pixels are common, so if you do get one, make sure to check how the screen's doing. I'm lucky to have one with no screen issues, but A lot of CC40 owners aren't so lucky. Happily, the CC40 did get a sequel that ironed out most of those issues, slimmed things down, and stayed on the market a lot longer. And that's my next collection item, the TI-74. The TI-74 Basic Calc is TI's last computer to use the same basic standards as the TI-99. The upside here over the CC40 being it's a slimmer, lighter machine and fixes any screen issues, with most of these machines working fine 35 years from their build date. The downside being that TI-74 Basic does not support custom graphics out of the box. And the smaller form factor makes it even harder to type on. But even if the typing isn't great, as the most compact legacy TI Basic computer TI ever made, and their last ever, it's got some pretty big appeal. Plus, with the included hard case making the on-the-go experience even more practical, it's a cool, ultra-portable 80s computer, even just for its own sake. And an extra bonus that makes the TI-74 even better is the Peripherals TI made for it. They outlined their plans for those in a slip of paper included with my TI-74, but most of them are frustratingly rare today. As a big fan of TI Basic cassette games, the CI7 cassette interface is an important example of those for me, so I'm glad I managed to nab one despite its rarity, since it offers a simple way to store and load TI Basic programs just like you would on the TI-99. Then the PC324 printer is a cute compact way to print your programs or produce program output. Just a 24-column printer, but with the TI-74 screen being what it is, you're probably not printing out anything too huge anyways. And finally, probably my favorite TI-74 peripheral I've come into possession of is the PC interface, which lets you load assembly subprograms that add to the capabilities of TI Basic, and write programs on your PC, then load to your TI-74. So, an absolute must for any power users. But enough about little-known hardware from the final days of TI Micros, because I've got a few items that fall into the software category that I likewise love having on hand. And one of those is the TI Sings disc from Trio Software. Now, this is a bit of a niche pick, I'll admit, but it is very up my alley, as someone who got back into the TI-99 in the 2000s, mainly via speech synth, and the opportunity it gives you to make the TI-99 not just speak, but sing.
Trio Plus Software presents TI Sings.
And TI Sings is the best of the 80s as far as that goes, with a selection of songs, some of which genuinely sound great, playing straight out of BASIC.
Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been here.
Then on top of that, you get a native synth editor for putting together new songs for playback later on. And while it takes a bit of figuring out, in its time it was a one-of-a-kind solution. It really represents the best that could be done with the speech tools available to every 99er in the 80s, requiring nothing but the console, synthesizer, and terminal emulator 2-cart. And even if you're too lazy to use the tools it gives you, you've got the included tunes to serenade you whenever you please.
I'd like to be under the sea in an octopus's garden in the shade.
So TI Sings is classic application software that I'd always want to have in my TI collection. But as far as software goes, it's probably no surprise if my top collection items are games that show what the system can do in even more amazing ways. And one of those that I mention a lot in my videos is Legends 2. Legends itself, the original, had a special place in TI-99 history as the first game to really offer an Ultima-style RPG experience on the TI-99, where you explore a world and gain wealth and experience and find secrets, then, eventually, defeat a Dark Lord. Of course, the TI-99 already had Tunnels of Doom, and had for years when Legends came out, but TOD is more of a dungeon crawl engine than a role-playing game, Monsters and weapons and dungeon graphics can be customized, but you can't really tell a story with it, and dungeon layout itself is random. So Legends and Legends 2 really did something that hadn't been done before on the TI-99. They had story events and unique locations and dungeons with descriptions that actually mean something inside the game universe. Which is why having Legends 2 in my collection as the culmination of that story and that design means a lot to me. It's mostly the same engine as the first game, but with graphical improvements here and there, and with even better pack-in materials coming along for the ride, with those really going beyond what you'd expect from a very indie late 80s TI-99 RPG. Though on the topic of RPG releases, long after the system's prime, recent years have taken things a whole lot further thanks to Realms of Antiquity by Adam Haas. And Realms of Antiquity is another game that delivers a physical package beyond anything you could reasonably expect from a modern TI-99 game, with its cloth map of the game world being a real highlight. Though, on a technical level too, the game really represents the most you could ever hope for from a disc-based TI RPG. In a way, we already had some sense of what the ultimate TI RPG might look like, since RPGs for the MSX1 were developed for the same TI graphics chip with exactly the same capabilities. And so, the Dragon Quest and Hydlide games were really a perfectly accurate preview of what grid-based TI RPG worlds might look like, with unlimited developer time and effort to devote to the project anyway. But Realms of Antiquity is that kind of world made real on the TI-99 itself. I still have a special place in my heart for Legends and Legends 2, given that unlike Realms of Antiquity, those can run on all original TI hardware, where Realms of Antiquity requires a third-party disk controller and third-party SAM's memory expansion. But these days, more memory expansion and better mass storage are easy to come by, and Realms of Antiquity makes the most of both, with a huge world that could well take you hundreds of hours to explore, if you're determined to see all of it. It's the product of many years of effort, and it shows. There's one more time the 2010s revolutionized the TI-99 library, though. And in software terms, it might be my favorite TI collection item, period. That being the TI-99's first and so far only FMV game, Dragon's Lair by Mike Brent. This game doesn't need much explanation. What it does is so impressive that it really just sells itself. From that amazing Dragon's Lair title sequence, which plays on startup, to the classic scenes that make up the original arcade game. And in this case, you can play to your heart's content without ever losing all your quarters along the way. All of the magic happens here on board a one-of-a-kind cart designed to make the game possible. No laser disc player here, just screen data being streamed to video RAM, and digital audio being generated in real time through the TMS 9919 sound chip in every TI-99. Performance is a tiny bit better if you have an F18A VDP, as the most popular modern upgrade over the classic 9918A used in the 994A, but the game was designed to use the original TI VDP, so even with that massive VDP upgrade, improvements are minor, since there's not much more that needs to be squeezed out of this machine that hasn't been already. Like Realms of Antiquity, Dragon's Lair came with a nice package that delivers all the commercial quality you'd hope for from a licensed game. So it's another case where owning the game doesn't just give you the game, it gives you something cool to put on your game shelf too. And since only around 150 copies were sold, Dragon's Lair really is a TI collector's item in every sense. So there you have it, my top TI-99 collection items. There are definitely rarer things out there, and there are ones that are way more useful or essential, but these are the ones that I'm happiest to have on my shelf, as cool examples of TI-99 technology history. Either because they're just so weird and unique, or because they're so important to the platform and its history, or because they're just that much fun to use. So I hope you liked this look through my collection cabinets, such as they are. And if you've got a few TI-99 tech items of your own that you see as the crowning glories of your collection, tell me about those in the comments. I'd be interested. See you next time.